Today, we're talking about Rocco coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert.
All right, welcome in on a Thursday Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Undoubtedly, we will still take some more time, maybe even in this episode, to dive into more of what Matt Rhule had to say at his Tuesday press conference this week to preview spring ball. But we found, and everyone may have heard it if you watched along, but if not, we'll keep you apprised here. We found the potential quote machine of the of like fall camp, potentially like a Big Ten Media Day situation. And it's a new guy, Rocco Spindler. We skipped over him on yesterday's podcast. Not today. This one's about Rocco.
The thing about offensive linemen is I think they're either really good at this or really bad. There's not a whole lot of in between. There's guys, and when I say bad, I mean like they don't have any interest. Yeah. There's like guys like Bryce Benhart, just didn't really get anything out of chatting up the media. But some of the greatest interviews in college football history are offensive linemen. They're generally smart and cerebral, and they think about the game in a different way than maybe a player at another position, a skill player. I mean, they're real, and they really they're in the game. They're not on the fringes. They're in the middle of the game. Like they define football. And I think sometimes the mix that you get with those kind of players, it turns out to be someone who just speaks the language of football. And maybe that's what we have in Rocco Spindler. I think it's possible that 1 9-second clip from Tuesday's interview summed up everything that he needs to say this offseason. They don't need to bring him back. I hope they do. They don't need to bring him back into the spring. They don't need to take him to Big Ten Media Days. We discussed this on your show on Wednesday. I hope they do. I think they could. I think he would do nicely there. But they don't have to, because they've got these 9 seconds with Rocco Spindler from Tuesday. Let's listen in.
Business, and it'll correlate to the rest of the team.
That was not.
And we got to be an O-line, driven program. That's where I'm coming from, and we have to handle our business, and it'll correlate to the rest of the team.
All right. Let's play that again, because I screwed it up and we started in the middle. So we're gonna play that one more time. It's only 9 seconds. Here, let's hear it again.
We got to be an O-line, driven program. That's where I'm coming from, and we have to handle our business, and it'll correlate to the rest of the team.
We need to be an O-line driven program, and then
that's really all you need.
The rest of it, yeah.
It's actually like a 5-second clip. The end of it is not even important. That's beautiful. That is something that I in the Nebraska fans, it's not quite snappy enough to put on a shirt, but I truly believe that him saying that is like that should be the motto of the offensive line. If they can be good enough that they're an O-line driven program, then so many other things, especially on the offensive side, and you could even argue the defensive side, will fall into place.
Yeah, and we've talked about the position a lot, and I don't think it's been. I think it gets unfairly thrown under the bus at Nebraska when things on the offense aren't working. Like I think it's been pretty solid the last couple of years. I wouldn't say it's like great or whatever, but I don't think it's been this huge black eye in the team. But and so there's that part of it, and then you talk about their coach and the offensive line coach and Donovan Raiola, and he's not particularly talkative. He doesn't talk to the media ever. And when he does, he doesn't say much. And so I think it's been a group for a long time now who they've just been quiet, and that's okay. They go about their business, and they try to get things done. Like I like the dynamic that Rocco Spindler brings into the room. Not to say that he's going to be running his mouth all the time or anything like that, but I just think he's a different type of personality than they have in that room right now. And he's got the chops to back it up. He started in the national championship game last year. Like, it's a big addition from the perspective.
That's a big part of it. If he had come in from Miami of Ohio and got to talking about how Nebraska needed to be an O-line driven program, I don't know that it would carry the same weight. But he played at Notre Dame, started multiple seasons, started through the playoff, played through injuries, made it to the national championship game. Notre Dame had to take the long route, just like Ohio State did. And he was a part of that. And he chose to come to Nebraska. That should endear him to Nebraska fans in a big way. And I don't want to make him out to be more than what we already know, but I think he's good. I think because of his credentials, he's good for this Nebraska offensive line, which is going through a lot right now. In the last segment of this show, we're going to go through the list of players who are injured going into spring practice. We kind of pushed past that on Wednesday as we reviewed Matt Rhule's comments from Tuesday, but it's a long list, and it includes a bunch of offensive linemen. And they got to have some kind of mojo going through this spring. Like it's an important developmental phase for this group. And there are young players, yes, but the young players need someone to look up to on the field. And they've got Justin Evans, but now they've also got this guy Spindler and Elijah Pritchett too, coming from Alabama.
When you hear hired gun, or you hear mercenary, basically we use those terms as 1-year transfers these days, which Rocco Spindler is going to end up being. I don't think of Rocco Spindler like types. I think that guy is going to take on a leadership role, right away at Nebraska, as we talked about a little bit already. So I just think that's really valuable to the room. And like I said before, I think it's a position room that needs that type of thing. And then I wonder, I wonder what the structure around him sort of looks like. You mentioned it. It's in flux. There's a lot of guys hurt. There's a lot of guys who have logged a lot of snaps who are gone, aren't here anymore. And there's a couple new guys, but I don't know. Rocco Spindler has this sort of feel to him, like he's not going to feel like a transfer by the time August 31st or whatever it is rolls around. Like that's kind of how it feels like to me. Pritchett, we'll see. But to have that guy in there to be the voice in the room, at least that's how it feels. That's a really good deal, I think, for them out of the portal.
There's in the world of transfers, and we're now we've seen this through a few cycles now. There are maybe three or four different kinds of 1-year players that you can get. You have, and as you were talking there a minute ago, I was thinking in my head, all right, who are examples here? And what I came up with real quick is you have the Samari Toure type of 1-year player who played at a smaller school and did everything right, but just needed the exposure at a bigger level to be able to show that he could do it here in order to get to the NFL. And it worked. You have the Trey Palmer kind of player, and he wasn't a senior, but somebody who was stuck in a place, very talented, but with a ton of other talented players, and just needed to be able to break free and be the guy. We talked about Dane Key being the guy and how Dana Holgerson sold him on that. Trey Palmer in his year at Nebraska was the guy, and that was tough to do at LSU. And he came and he made the most of that, and he got to the NFL. And then you have other 1-year transfers who need to leave somewhere because it just wasn't right. Like Micah Mazuka, and this is at Spindler's position last year, coming in from Florida. He needed a fresh start, and it was up and down. And sometimes you can leave a place, but you unless you change who you are, some of those old demons are going to come back. Rocco is different from all of those guys. He's kind of like the type of transfer that the 1-year transfer that Nebraska hasn't seen because he was in a good place at Notre Dame.
Mhm.
Just had a feeling like it wasn't trending in his direction to be the kind of player he wanted in his last year. So he said, I gotta move on. He said, he didn't want to transfer. He didn't see himself as a portal player. And yet there he was in the portal a couple of days after the national championship game. And Nebraska stands a chance to really be the beneficiary of all of this.
Might be the most sure, the out of the hit rates for all those kind of transfer portal players that you just described there. The Rocco kind is the highest, I think.
Those are the ones you really would like to get. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
no doubt about it. All right, let's take a quick time out here. On the other side, we'll talk about Matt Rhule's attitude at the moment, and if it's changed at all. Back after this.
All right, a message right now about Monarch Money. Do you ever wonder where all your money went between dining out, online shopping, entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. It has all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for $50 off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off in your first year.
And I want to take a second to talk to you about Factor. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor is the choice for you, and it makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle. So whether you need calorie smart meals, protein plus meals, keto meals, Factor has that and even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks to keep you all fueled up all day long. You will love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. The convenience is unbeatable. There's no prep, there's no mess, and there's great food in just a couple of moments. Eat smart with Factor. Get started today at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off. Use that code LOCKEDONCollege50 off to get your 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Once again, LOCKEDONCollege50 off, OFF, and at factormeals.com. Once again, LOCKEDONCollege50 off. You get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
All right, welcome back. Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you on this Thursday episode. Connor, I was a little surprised on Wednesday, I will admit, when I heard on your show. Well, we were talking on your show Wednesday afternoon or late morning, and you asked me about Matt Rhule and kind of a confrontational approach that he took. Yeah. And like, you were not alone.
Word. Yeah.
You were
I was looking for a better word, but it's maybe the fuse is a little shorter these days, you know?
Well, you were not alone. Like, I heard this elsewhere in some conversations on Wednesday that it was a different Matt Rhule. And I was thinking about it, and I maybe the reason that it didn't really shake me. It didn't catch me off guard is because we've been talking about this for a couple of months now. And I think we heard a little bit of this from Matt Rhule in February when he talked to the media. Although at that point, we were like trying to catch up from having not talked to him since the Pinstripe Bowl. I mean, we've gotten him twice in these press conferences since Nebraska played its last game, which, is fairly normal in college football. And he was gracious to give us 40 minutes of his time yesterday. So it was like 2 press conferences. But, yeah, I think I've grown accustomed or grown to expect kind of what we heard. If that had happened, if we had that press conference in December, then yeah, I do think that it would have caught me off guard a bit. But What's like your description of what we're seeing right now, like this evolution of the Nebraska head coach as he goes toward his third year?
Well, I'll let. So I cut up a couple parts. You asked him a question where he had a 5-minute answer. It was literally 5 minutes.
It was not a long. It was not that. It was not a 5-minute question. Just to be clear.
Yeah, we've established that. He shortened it up. It was nice and tidy. I have the tape to prove it. But it was about his what Nebraska's done with their non-conference schedule, and then he went on Urban Meyer's podcast and said, "Hey, why would we ever do this?" And he was really definitive about it. And so, he has now got a chance to listen to every, to hear and read and whatever everyone's response to Nebraska doing this. And I don't know what he's seeing or hearing. But he's definitely defiantly defending his position. So this is, for context here, this is 2 different parts of the 5-minute answer that are kind of split together. I think they make sense together, but you'll be able to hear the cut in the middle here. So here's Matt Rhule answering Mitch's not so long question yesterday.
I'm playing like, oh man, we get screwed in the scheduling every year, and then these things like can't be both. We can't be victims, and yet So, and then I think the biggest thing everyone has to understand, honestly, is what I'm seeing from Troy, and I see Troy taking a lot of heat on all sides. Like, this is going to be a financial game. I mean, Trev said it from day one when I got here. He's like, hey, Matt, you should consider this job because we're the only Big Ten school with no debt, and we're in really good financial shape and all these different things, right? And he was right. He kept saying, hey, revenue sharing is going to come. There's these lawsuits. And I would sit in meetings and people kind of look at Trev like, is he sure? He was 100% right. So everything that Trev said has shown up. If you're paying the players, where does that money come from? Like, where does that money come from? So it's going to come from new concessions deals that are the best thing financially. It's going to come from all that. Now, I'm stupid for even saying this because I'm going to take a bunch of heat for it, but it's just like you can't have everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, we really want to win, but we also want this, but we also want this. It's like, you know what? When I go recruit kids in Florida and Georgia and they're like, Coach, when are we wearing this uniform and that uniform? At some point, I got to be like, it's kind of hard for me to say, hey, if I do that, people are going to be upset. Do you want the good recruits? We got it. We got to just make a decision here, like where we want to go. And so there's a big financial component to this.
That was very stream of consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, and it's very clear now who he's talking to. Like, he's talking to the fans. He's talking to the people who who root for his team.
Did I hear him saying there that he hates Runza? I think I heard that.
I can't tell. Like, I even did a segment on this show, on my show one day about this. Like, I don't know where the wind is blowing on this topic. I can't tell if people want him to play Tennessee or are mad that he's running from Tennessee or are very supportive of this because of the reason. Like, I can't tell what the majority of people are saying about this topic. But he's obviously like defending it, so he's heard it the other way. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's pretty split. I think that's why. I think it is hard to tell which way the wind's blowing, and I don't sense, like, very few people who I talk to about this have a passionate response one way or the other. Most of them are kind of like, all right, well, I mean, it wasn't like I was super excited about that game to begin with. Now, maybe if it had been Oklahoma, maybe if it had been Texas, some school that Nebraska had recent history with, or Nebraska's played Tennessee, but it's always been in bowl games, and there's not bad blood there. If you had ripped away like another Colorado series or something, then I think you'd be getting some more emotional responses. But there's not a ton of reason to be emotional about a home and home with Tennessee. Yeah, and I think people understand. Like, he's a good communicator, and I think what he said, people understand that this is a wild time, an unpredictable time in college sports. So if he believes it and his boss Dannon believes it, then all right, we'll go along. Just please get us wins. That's to me, that's probably the prevailing thought from fans.
This is the part we talked about like today, our Wednesday rather on my show. Like, when he got here, it was the word I used was pandering. It's probably not full on that, but obviously he had a really and still does had a great and deep appreciation for like how it's supposed to go around here or what. And then I think he found out the fact that people have really are really opinionated on how it's supposed to go around
on everything.
Yeah, exactly.
but except the Tennessee at 26-27.
There is
series.
Like you talk to people and there's like, yeah, there's a way to do it. There's a specific way to do it. And I think he's finally realized like, yeah, well, guess what, people? That crap has not worked for a long time now. So I'm going to do it my way. And either it works or I die, like if we die, we die. And so like, and
wow. Hey, good.
I really like that. I think if a coach is going to be here and only be a portion of himself, to appease fans or whatever it is, then you don't get the real guy. You don't get to find out whether that full person actually works. Like it's always been a challenge at this job. And I think there's been coaches who have fallen victim to that before, including probably his predecessor, to a certain extent. So I'm in full support of him just being like, yep, this is what we're going to do. And you better get on board or not. And that's fine. I don't care if you do or don't.
When did that change occur with Matt Rhule? I think it can be pinpointed to a very, very specific time. Let's come back after the break and see if we can nail that down. That's next. A message right now from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful, and TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20 forms, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees.
All right, a couple more things I want to get to on today's episode, but let's see if we can nail this down. When was the specific moment in time when Matt Rhule, kind of this light bulb went off in his head, at least as we read it? You said you could pin it back to a specific point, and I'm going to try and guess what you're thinking.
You probably have it. I'll say it, and then you just tell me if this is what you were thinking.
Okay.
What was the date in March of 2024 when Trev Alberts left?
Yeah, that was the one in my head. It was right around now. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Like, wasn't it a week before the tournament?
It was, yeah, right, because he was the Texas A&M athletic director for the Nebraska-Texas A&M game in the first round.
Yeah.
So, I think that Matt Rhule came to Nebraska and was sold on a lot of the idealistic nature, and the stuff that you talked about in the last segment. Like, there's a way to do things and a way that Nebraska fans like to see things done. And he was sold that by Ted Carter, and he was sold that by Trev Alberts. And then Ted got up and left and went to Ohio State, one of Nebraska's one of the biggest obstacles in the way of Nebraska achieving success in the Big Ten. And then Trev, seemingly out of the blue, I talked to Matt Rhule the day, I think just on text, the day that Trev left, and he was in Ireland, I think.
Yep.
And he's like, I'm completely caught off guard. I don't know. And then we got the farmer meme later that night. But yeah, I think that something triggered there. And very soon after, you had the details of the house settlement start to come out, and he realized that he no longer could run this program where he was going to let every player who deserved an opportunity to play at Nebraska in his mind have that opportunity. He was being told by the powers in college football that he had to cut his roster down to 105. And I think at that point, those things together, but with Trev being the main impetus, Trev's departure, he just kind of threw his hands up and says, you know what, if this is going to work and I'm going to make this work, I'm going to have to do it my way. And the only way that I know how to do it my way, like I've been through some failures, been through some successes, is to only think about the program, only think about the success in the program, and all this other stuff that we've been working on and that sounds really good and seems important for Nebraska. It's going to have to take a backseat to us trying to win football games
as he sees fit, right? And it does. There's no guarantee that it's going to work, right? So it creates this, Bo was that way. Like Bo, that happened to Bo. That probably happened to Bo before he got here. But that was kind of how Bo was wired. He's like, yeah, we're gonna. I'm not gonna care about what other people are thinking. And then it did create a sort of adverse. We saw the end result of it, but like it did create this sort of interesting tension and adversarial type of relationship between the fan base and the coach. I'm not saying we're headed that direction here, but it's it's the seeds of it, I suppose.
If a coach and Bo didn't necessarily change, like you said, Bo got there before he got to Nebraska. If a coach is able to undergo some kind of transformation in their time at a school, then I think it bodes well. Like if they can make a 90-degree turn or a 45-degree turn, then I think it bodes well for the success that they ultimately have at that school. And Bo had success at Nebraska. He lasted 7 years. The last two coaches did not have that kind of success at Nebraska. And I don't think there was ever any kind of a turn that those coaches made, Mike Riley and Scott Frost. Like Riley just didn't ever get to a place where he was allowed to make a turn. And Frost did. They wanted him to make a turn, and he resisted. And it cost him his job very quickly. So here's Rhule, and it wasn't like his job was on the line. Like that wasn't necessarily the case, but he saw himself, and I think he was pushed along by Troy Dannon. I think Troy Dannon helped him see, what might be right, going back to the beginning of November of last season. And since then, he's made a turn. I wouldn't say it's like a 180-degree turn or even a 90-degree turn, but he's made a some type of a shift in the way that he goes about running this program, and the fact that he's been able to make that transformation and seemingly has done it willingly, it's it should bode well for the future.
All right, a note or two here before we get out of here. Some players that Rhule mentioned. He came up to the podium and he said, "Here, I got a list for you. Here are the list of players that will be out for spring ball." Demetrius Bell, Connor Keneally, Jameer Khan, Jalen George, Turner Corcoran, Gunnar Gatula, Roger Gradney, Mac Markaway, Carter Nelson, Dawson Merritt, Pierce Newberry, Evan Taylor, and Keelan Smith. And then Tristan Alvano, David Borchers, Sua Lefotu, and Henry Lutovsky will be limited in some form or fashion this spring. That is a large group of players. Some of them more important than others, but everybody kind of becomes important when the roster gets cut down. So, I mean, it's Nebraska will have an interesting spring here and a big opportunity for a lot of guys who can step up in the absence of those guys.
Rhule went through that list too fast when he was talking on Tuesday. I was trying to take notes and get everybody down, and I basically threw up my arms halfway through it and said, I'm going to listen for the important names and try to write those down.
I'll go back later.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have videotape and audio of his interview to go back and collect everything. Yeah, so clearly we knew about the offensive line, and 4 potential starters. Oh, I don't even have Teddy Prohaska on here. That's another guy who's limited this spring. So let me just type that one in. Offensive lineman Teddy Prohaska. That's like four players with starting experience on the offensive line who are limited or out this spring: Gatula, Corcoran, Prohaska, and Lutovsky. So we talked about that earlier in the show with Rocco. They're going to have to make something out of that and move forward this spring. But the ones that are kind of disappointing and I think a little tougher to deal with we knew that Dawson Merritt was coming in and had an injury, but Pierce Newberry's out, another one of the freshman linebackers. And then Jalen George, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Because he's an important piece. I think he's somebody that Nebraska needs to. They need to find something there on the D line because they're thin with experience and with big bodies.
Totally.
So you hope that he's going to be okay and is able to get something out of the spring and good to go for August.
Yeah, right. You hope it's short term. I mean, he's been around college football enough to where you can feel at least okay about plugging him in. But remember, he's stepping up a big level too. And then the two tight ends, we knew Carter Nelson had surgery right after the Pinstripe Bowl or right before the Pinstripe Bowl. No, he played in the Pinstripe Bowl, right?
Did Carter Nelson? Yeah, he did. The surgery was after.
Okay,
that's right.
Yeah, like immediately after the Pinstripe Bowl. So we knew about that, but still, any portion of time on the shelf for him and his development is significant. And Mac Markway, I mean, I don't know what that's going to be. Like that's two tight ends on a roster where you already lost Fedoni and Borkercher, and you're adding Harburg, obviously, but you have Luke Lindenmeyer, and that's kind of it, and a bunch of young guys. So kind of an interesting. I mean, there's a lot of open spaces out there.
Nebraska might not be able to have a spring game if it had wanted to. If there had been none of these concerns about tampering and what everything else, I with all of these offensive linemen and tight ends out before spring practice even starts, to think that Nebraska is going to get through 14 spring practices without a few more guys having soft tissue injuries or even you hope to have nothing major is unrealistic. Like they're going to be players banged up at the end of spring, and it would have been difficult to even put two teams together. They might have been able to have a scrimmage offense against defense because you would think they'll have 5 healthy linemen at the end of spring practice, but to think that they'll have 10 or 12 or 15, whatever you need to play a spring game, I don't know about that.
Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think that's it. We got the mailbag show coming on Friday, so look forward to that. Join us, please. Your questions are appreciated. It's too late to get questions in because we're going to tape this thing momentarily.
Nice, full disclosure.
Just to let you behind the scenes. But thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac and Andy. Don't wait for March Madness to start. It's almost here. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.